Welcome back to Chris and Retro. Uh, Today's video is going to talk about a subject near and dear to my heart. Recently, I shared with you a study I've referred to us a number of times, discussing some of the mental health issues with kids. And you know, it's amazing to me how we are actually um, addressing some of it now. I think one of the pet peeves I have is that people do an awful lot of talking, and it's kind of ironic, and so that's what I'm doing on this YouTube channel. But what are we doing to take action relative to some of these issues, especially with kids? So I discuss a lot about addiction, and one of my opinions on this is prevention is really where the win is, and where prevention starts is a lot of times in terms of how kids or our adolescents are able to manage the situations in their life. Most times it's trauma. Oftentimes it's just coping mechanisms for dealing with certain things and finding unhealthy coping mechanisms. So whenever I come across, some people that are discussing similar mindset, or what I think is at least some eye-opening moments for them, and new thinking, I want to make sure I'm calling that out. And I came across a video. Actually, I wasn't even watching it for this subject at all. I was watching it based on my own entertainment. And again, once again, it happens to be in the mixed martial arts arena. But there was a discussion on the Michael Bisping podcast. It's Bisping and Anthony Smith. The Believe You Me podcast actually is what they call it. But both guys are on this podcast, and they talk all about fighting, and they have a different perspective on it. And if you aren't following UFC or any fighting at all, Anthony is a current fighter in the light heavyweight division. Michael Bisping is I believe a Hall of Famer at this point, but he's a legend in the game for sure, for some good reasons and some bad reasons. But both have come with a tremendous amount of intelligence and understanding of this fight game. But the other thing I appreciate is, particularly with Anthony, is just he's real. He's a dad. He's a fighter, but I also think that he presents himself in a more real way probably than I've seen most fighters. And he's somebody I just have a lot of respect for in terms of how he behaves himself. But on this show, he discusses some of the challenges he's had as a father and some of the things that he's observed. And now this show is supposed to be talking about the new UFC champ, Jamahal Hill, but it was not. This one portion of the discussion kind of took a turn here based on some of the casual conversation they have. So I'm going to react to this video. I don't recall all the elements of it, but it was just the idea is that they're recognizing some of the situations that happen with kids, and I think that it's useful content for all of us to consider. So with that, I will start sharing some of the things that they are commenting on, and we can have a little bit of discussion here about what I've seen. So they're picking up this point where Anthony has characterized the situation with his daughter. She's 11, and she's having some issues, social issues in school, and his approach to it, and how he once was with this whole thing, and how he's considering it new. And that's what really perked up my interest.
Home kind of upset and down.
Very, very. It's just weighing. She's a lot like Callum. Like, she's very quiet, very polite, very mild.
Speaking of his daughter,
not a whole lot bothers her. So, at first I think I was kind of an asshole about it. She was complaining about it. And then I go off like, well, there's all these kids. They don't got fucking friends, and they don't got, there's kids that are sent home with meals because they don't have food at home. And like, you guys are complaining about where to sit at lunch. Like, this is stupid. But it turned out to be a whole lot more serious than that. And so I don't know. I just popped in my head. So I was thinking about it.
No, absolutely.
So he's qualifying it. It's obviously bothering him. Here you got a mixed martial arts channel. Their casual conversation. This was weighing on him. He just got done dealing with this at school, and he's acknowledging the fact that he just dismissed it. Just kid's problem. You don't know how serious. It's not serious for you because you're just a kid. And I think that we all do that a lot. Well, many of us have done that to kids in the past. We kind of couch it in adult problems and think that the adult problem is far more grave than what that kid's going through. But keep in mind the context for them. The totality of their capacity to deal with whatever is going on is being invested in this situation. It means that much to them. The tools that they bring to the table are minimal compared to what we do as adults, or should be able to as adults. There are time on this planet and dealing with similar situations of like size, or like scale, or even in that age that they're at. So much is changing, and they don't really feel equipped for that. And then a lot of times they're isolating. So in this situation, I appreciate Anthony's willingness to acknowledge the fact that we do minimize and dismiss kids an awful lot. Keep in mind the context of where we're going to win any drug situation is prevention. Once the ship sailed, it's a real tough battle. So these are areas where, as parents and as fathers particularly, we need to acknowledge what our kids are going through and not try to ask them necessarily to tough it through. But let's just get in the rest of the video and hear what they have to say.
And it's so important to keep on top of that stuff, because like for us, we kind of push it to one side and think, it's just kid stuff. Yep. But inside their young and, with respect, immature minds, you know, it can be. And sadly, you know, people bloody commit suicide over this stuff. It's
at
awful.
that age.
So,
at that age.
Crazy. Yeah, no, I
remember the stat that we just found out from 2021 that came out, that 1 in 5 adolescents had a significant event related to depression that often led to impairment. Only 94% of them ever sought treatment. Or no, 94% of them did not seek treatment. Even though treatment was available to them, they just did not. And there's a lot of factors in that. Some of it's access. Some of it is people just telling them to tough it out, and it gets worse and worse. And, you know, they're acknowledging suicide. You know, I have a bias being close to the behavioral health world a little bit. Yeah, the suicide rates are climbing, completions of suicide, not just attempts, the actual completions of suicide. So I'd qualify that statement even more, but I appreciate that a mainstream channel in a mixed martial arts genre would take a minute to call out that our kids are in such trouble with the way that they think about things, that we should consider a different way of looking at it as well.
It's crazy.
Well, it feels to them like the world is crashing down on them. And
exactly.
To me, I kind of push it off like, it's not that big of a deal. Stop worrying about it. Like, just ignore her, stay away from her. It's whatever, you know. But then the little shit started bothering me. Like, the same girl, they're telling secrets over here like little girls, and then one of the other girls, Araya, says, well, you know, what is she talking about? And she said, oh, she just said that you're a spoiled brat and your dad's rich. I was like, that's coming from parents. That's not coming.
For sure.
That's coming from parents. Or like, yeah, like she just.
There it is. So that being driven down from parents. So what I appreciate about Anthony is he's a situation here where you got a light heavyweight fighter. He's a phenomenal fighter and one of the top ranked guys. He'll fight anybody, anytime. He's had some wars. And he's got a competition coming up. He's at least willing to consider that his position should be changed. And that, as parents, one of our obligations is to reconsider our position all the time. How are we viewing the circumstance? Are we handling it correctly? If it's not just on them, what are we doing to impact that? And, you know, here Anthony has, you know, an observation that jealousy thing coming from rich parents supposedly is coming from potentially another source. And I would have to agree with that. And he, you know, he's in the public light, gets ripped on every fight. There's people, one side of the camp is for whoever he's fighting, the other side of the camp is for him. They're, you know, going to be ripped. One side's going to be crushing the other one. So he's not, you know, he's not lacking experience in what it's like to have somebody, you know, starting these little, you know, war of words with you. And I think it's interesting that he had this perspective on it.
Spoiled brat, and you're spoiled. She said she was a spoiled brat because her dad.
That's it. Pizza. Thanks, YouTube.
As rich and famous. Like, that's not coming from kids.
That is not coming from her. It's coming from the father. And because it's coming from the father, you could do the old classic one. You know what the classic one is, don't you? You go around, you see the fucking dad. You have a little word in his ear. So, yeah, I am rich and famous. And you know why I'm rich and famous? For kicking people's asses in the octagon. And if you don't have a word with your daughter, you're going to find yourself.
Well, he's got some.
So I would not recommend that. Michael's massively sarcastic. So just please read that for what it is.
Got some stupid fucking band too, apparently. And like a couple of the teachers were like wearing one of my fight shirts.
Name it in the band. We know the power of belief.
So here we go. This is where we get sideways. So this is where we screw up as dads, especially dads that have, you know, a certain belief system. We all of a sudden want to take it and dominate the situation. That's not doing anything for the 11-year-old at all, actually. You know, her and construct of her environment, no matter what we do with dad, as tempted as we are to wipe dad out and belittle his band and all this other stuff, that's not really helping the situation. And I think over time, these guys will get it, especially Anthony. Michael, I'm not sure. He's pretty immune to all that stuff and doesn't really, I don't think he really cares. But Anthony, I see him as somebody that's actually introspective a little bit more than most. He's also, you know, but I think that both of them are getting in that trap as dads, that we love our kids so much that we want to just spin up for war every single time they're in trouble. And I don't think that necessarily works in the type of environment we're talking about. Now, if somebody is abusing your daughter and it's an adult, for sure, by all means, I'm co-signing anything that these guys are talking about. However, the speaking of a girl that actually is trying to find a way to find her lane in that construct, this whole stuff with the dad isn't necessarily going to fix that problem.
The believers.
No, we can't do that.
I know.
We're not there yet.
Down
We're not
almost
there
that
yet.
time.
But we keep this shit keeps up though. Shit keeps up. We're gonna sick the believers on some motherfuckers.
Right, here's what we're going to do. Here's another trip that's never going to happen. We're all going to jump on a plane. We're going to go to the gig the next time they're performing, and we are going to just trash the bar. We're going to smash the guitars over the head.
Yeah, fucking crazy. Parenting is hard, Mike. Parenting is hard.
There it is. Parenting is hard. It is actually an active sport. It's a participation of sport. You have to be involved. You have to understand what's going on with your kids and be willing to adapt and stuff like that. You know, I have a stepdaughter as well, and probably one of my biggest challenges I have is you know, being a role model in her life, and yet, you know, having her you know, follow the guidelines and rules of the house at the same time, you know, the balance between what her mom's view for her life is as well. I mean, these are challenges as speaking directly to men in homes. We have to course correct a lot, and it's not something that we should take as a victim role. It's something we should really understand, that we're in a position of strength. We have an opportunity to invest in people's lives in a way that others don't. And our willingness to accept that role oftentimes will, I know in my own personal life, how I adapt. Oftentimes I adapt or do not adapt. If I have a season of poor behavior where I'm not adapting and not being the right type of stepfather or the greatest dad or whatever else, it's usually because I'm set in my ways and I'm not looking what the result is, other than are the rules being followed, rather than what's the totality of the circumstance. It's not much different than what I'm seeing here with Anthony and Michael, and that, you know, it's really easy when you're capable, and both of these guys are certainly capable of wiping out male enemies of their kids. I mean, there's no question about it. And they could absolutely make life miserable for a father that's causing some abuse on their child. I'm not saying that's the solution for the child, because keep in mind, what is our objective in the end? Her long-term success and prevention from any you know, negative impact of her from this season of her life. And, you know, going after dads isn't necessarily going to do that. But to Anthony's point, parenting is tough. Now, you know, for this video, what I want to do is just share, you know, I thought it was interesting. Their video was nothing to do with being involved in parenting. In fact, they were talking about one of Anthony's training partners winning the championship. And so, you know, that's how it happens. I mean, when your kids, you're so invested in your kids, and you're, you know, feeling their pain, and then you have new understandings of what's going on there. It's going to come out of your mouth in certain circumstances. It's going to overwhelm you. And so I appreciated the fact they had the conversation. Do I agree with everything they had to say in it? If I'm honest, probably I agreed with everything they had to say with it in terms of how I would emotionally invest in the same situation. I'm a hypocrite if I'm sitting here saying I wouldn't have that exact same conversation with somebody next to me if somebody was messing with my daughter. What I'm saying is that we should all consider that probably is not the best solution. And I can say it now because that's not my daughter in the circumstances. We should at least, as men, pause for a minute and recognize what she's feeling. And I tell you, I think where that lesson came true to me is my daughter, who's in college now, she's an amazing person. And there have been times where we've had to earn trust from each other. So she's gone through a season of life where I was really messed up. And I've gone through seasons of her life where things have been troubling for her. She needed to trust that she could come to me with grave situations and know that I wasn't going to go off the chain on this whole thing. And I wasn't going to be an absolutely spinning maniac and make it worse for her in her social environment. Sometimes she just needed to know Dad had her back for that conversation, and that if she needed him, he'd be there with everything he needs to be. But for now, she just needed to go to that person and talk to him. That's something my daughter taught me. That is not something I learned on my own, because I'd be more apt to, you know, react like these two have, and maybe even more irrationally. They were kind of joking as they were saying it. And I think that, you know, softens it a little bit, even though they probably were feeling these things down deep inside. My daughter taught me through life how that's better. And I do get tempted still. I mean, we've gotten to a point now where she's like, I don't need you to say that, or Dad, I don't need that. And we're okay. And I'll stop immediately with her. So as fathers, I guess my word of advice really is, and parents generally, but fathers for sure, hear where they're at, come alongside them, be there when they've got to tell you about the situation. Don't make them afraid of what they're creating by coming to you. Be there for them so they know you have their back and they have a place to go. I think from my experience, that's been a huge win, is they at least have a place to go. You're not a place to hide from as they're hiding from these other things. You may not always be their solution. It still may be very grave in their mind there, but the best we can do is be present, be available, and be willing to invest at the pace that they can handle it. We got to look at where they're coming from. And it's not to say that some of the stuff that they're not, that sometimes kids make a bigger deal out of things really than they need to. And I understand that. There are times when they're just being dramatic about things, but that's really not for us to assess. When somebody's in that, when a kid's in that situation, again, I'm not a counselor, I'm not a professional. I have to put that qualifier up there. This is based on life experiences. Sometimes they just have to go through that emotion, and then we can talk through some practical steps to deal with it. And you just got to be there the whole time. You just have to be there, being present, be willing to be part of the story, be an option. We can't solve all these things for kids, but I think that if we start doing that, we'll be further ahead of the curve on this. Maybe start avoiding some ugly things like overdoses. Appreciate you guys tuning in. I hope you like this video. I thought it was interesting. Some of the content these guys had, it was cool. I looked back over it a couple of times. I'm like, wow, I wasn't expecting that. And I agree with their position on it. We have to look at things differently. Please like and subscribe, share. I appreciate your comments. The subscription on the channel means everything. It really does make the channel grow. It gives us more exposure to other people that might appreciate this message. So if you could just take a minute, click that subscribe button. That would be tremendous. Have a lot of utility for the show. Until I speak to you again, stay productive and stay out of trouble.